Hi Jeep lovers, Tom here. Today in this video we're going to be removing the engine from my 1962 CJ-5 Jeep. We got it taken into the shop for a little work. So, a quick overview of what we're going to be doing. I'm going to remove the whole grille radiator unit as a single piece. We're going to be removing both fenders. Come a little closer. We're going to take the exhaust manifold off, the fuel pump, carburetor, air cleaner housing. Let's go around the other side. The battery's already out. We're going to take the alternator off, the starter, the distributor. All those will come out before we pull the engine. After we do that, we take the two front engine mounts off, which are right down here. And we're going to take the bolts out of the bell housing, and we'll be able to lift the engine right out. Come over here. Up in this tree, I have a chain between two trees that I'm going to use a come-along to lift the engine once we have it all loosened up and everything removed, and we're going to pick it out of the engine bay with that. So there aren't any special tools you need for this. I don't have a shop. Really the only special tool you're going to need is the come-along if you don't have one, and most people probably have one or something similar. So let's get started and we'll start taking this thing apart. It's always a good idea to take some pictures on your phone that you can reference later when you're putting this back together. Sometimes things like the throttle linkage or the wiring for the alternator or the starter, some of that can get confusing when you go to put it back together. So make sure to take some pictures. So I've drained the oil, most of the gas from the gas tank, and the antifreeze, and make sure you drain the plug on the side of the end to get all the antifreeze out of the water jacket. So next I've taken off the upper and lower radiator hoses. We've also taken off the wires from this little block down here that's for the headlights and the turn signals, and I've numbered them and I've taken a picture so I know where they go. Okay, the next thing to do, there are 3 bolts that hold this grill to the fender. So there's 3 on each side. We're going to take those off. Those are 7/16 inch. Okay, once you have the 6 bolts loose from the grill to the fenders, there's one center bolt right down here. It's a 5/8. You're going to have to grab it from both ends. So that's the next thing to take out. So this is the 5/8 center bolt on the radiator, bottom of the radiator. Julie's holding the top side. And we'll take this off. So I'm going to take the shroud off, the fan shroud, with 3 screws on each side. Okay, the grill radiator assembly is all loose. It should just come right off of there. Be careful not to damage your radiator, and we'll set that aside. Okay, next we're going to take off both the fenders. There are only 4 bolts holding on the fenders, so we'll take those off and both fenders will pop right off. They're 1/2 inch size. So I've made a little box just to keep my bolts and parts in. It's always a good idea to try to keep them together. So this fender just comes right off once you get all the bolts out. It's pretty straightforward. So once you get all the bolts out of the fenders, they just come right off. And it'll make it much easier to access the rest of the parts you want to remove here. So next up, we're going to take off the air cleaner and the carburetor. So these are 7/16 that hold the main air cleaner on, and then we'll take off the intake tube too. So this has oil in it, so you want to make sure not to tip it over because the bottom is filled with oil. And for something like this, if you can put the bolts back in where they came from, it's probably better than trying to figure out where they went later. And this on the other two sides has a slot, so that just comes right off. Next I'm going to take the fan off. 4 7/16" bolts, piece of cake. Next up we're going to take the alternator off. This is a single wire alternator, so I've marked this wire as alternator and taken the one wire off. Next we're going to take the belt off. We'll loosen up the tensioning nut or bolt. Okay, I'm going to take this bolt all the way out so I can lift that up, then I can get the belt off. Next we're going to take the two bottom bolts out. We're going to leave the whole bracket together, just take the two main mounting bolts out. Okay, there's the alternator. I'm just going to leave all the bracket together. That'll go right back how it came off. And once again, if I can, I'm going to put the bolts back where they came from so I don't have to remember everything. This was for the tensioner, so that's where it's going to go. Next we're going to do the ground strap. Very simple. I'm going to leave it on this side for now, and I'm going to take it off the block side. Okay, next we're going to take the starter off. Just take a picture of your wiring. It's pretty simple. There are only the one wire goes to the top terminal, and the main one from the battery go to the side. Okay, so the starter just has the two bolts. This one you might have to hold from the other side. They're both 3/4, and once you get them both off, the starter will pull right off. Okay, once you get the other bolt out, the starter just falls right off, basically. Shit. Hang on to it because it's heavy. Next I'm going to take the distributor off. And first I'm going to remove the vacuum line from the carburetor base. Looks like it's a 3/8" wrench. So I've taken the spark plug wire holder off of the valve cover case, and I've numbered my spark plug wires. I just started from the front and went 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm taking the wire from the coil to the distributor off. Just one wire. Then we're going to take the bolt off the bottom of the distributor. It's a 7/16" bolt, just one bolt. The distributor should pull right out. And we're going to worry about getting this back together the way it goes later. You just need to aim the rotor at a certain plug, and it's pretty basic. So I'm going to put the bolt back in here and we'll set the distributor aside. Okay, next we're going to take the exhaust off of the exhaust manifold. There's just two bolts that hold it on. I believe they're 9/16. Okay, next I'm going to take off the exhaust manifold. This is a 9/16. These are torqued, so you might want to loosen them. I've already loosened them, but you might want to loosen them in order, rotate them a little bit, because they are a torqued item. And once we get these nuts off, I'm hoping it'll come right off. So I've removed the nuts from my exhaust manifold studs, and I've torqued the exhaust pipe down so it got off of this stud here, and it should just come right off. There you go. So next I'm going to take this linkage off, take some good pictures of it, how it's on there, because it's a little confusing sometimes. So I'm taking some of the cotter pins off, and I'm taking that off. And there's a spring that goes down too, the return spring, so you got to make sure you take that off and remember where it goes. And this is going to stay here with the vehicle. And this part, I'm going to take this part off with the carburetor. So I've taken the linkage off of this bracket that's on one of the head bolts. I'm also going to take off this bracket that's on the carburetor. Oh, I don't see it. So this is all going to stay stay in the vehicle. This I'm going to kind of leave intact because it's easier to figure out how it goes back together. Next I'm going to take the gas line off the carburetor. That's a 7/16. Next I'm going to take off the carburetor. There are two 9/16 inch nuts that hold it on. One you need an extension like this on the back side, and the other one you need an end wrench. So there's a carburetor. I'm going to leave this linkage on there just so it's a little easier to remember how it goes back together. I'm going to just carefully set it aside so it doesn't get beat up. Okay, I think the last thing on this side besides the engine mount is this, I believe it's a water temperature sensor. That's a 5/8 inch wrench to get that out, and we're just going to leave that right there. That's it for this side. We disconnected the gas line that came off the fuel pump that went up to the carburetor. I disconnected the other one that went to the tank. I've got the tank mostly drained, so there's nothing coming out of there. The next thing to do, there are two 1/2 inch bolts that hold the fuel pump onto the block, and we're going to remove those. Okay, there's the fuel pump. Somebody's got plenty of RTV on there, don't they? So that's it for this side and the other side. To get the engine prepped for the final removal, it's taken about 2.5 to 3 hours, and we weren't really rushing things. We're kind of taking our time and making a video, obviously. So after lunch, we're going to move it over to the chain here, and we're going to take the motor mounts off, release the block from the bell housing, and pull it out. So we relocated the Jeep to between these two trees where we have a chain going across, and then I have it come along and have it attached to a exhaust manifold bolt that goes into the block on one side, short chain, and on the other side to another bolt that is actually the carburetor bolt. But that goes into the block. They should be plenty strong. The next thing we have to do, let's go to the other side. The next thing we have to do is take off, I believe there are 8 or 9 bell housing bolts. These are in here, and they're all around. They're underneath, and some are a little tougher to get to than others. I believe they're 9/16 inch heads, and then the other ones, there are 2 front engine mounts. They are 3/4. So some of the top bolts you won't be able to get at the back side of them. These other ones are pretty easy. I used a ratchet on this one, and that's what the bolt looks like. They're a fine threaded bolt, so don't lose your nuts there. And then we'll just keep going around. It's a fairly tight space to work in, so you just have to be patient. So I'm underneath the vehicle now. This is a look at the bolts that will be taken off. There are different lengths to them, so just keep track of the lengths. And then this one is a length that goes back to the frame, back to right here. That ball end clips into a bracket on the frame, and the front of it goes to one of the lower bolts. Okay, some of these are hard to get at, and you may have to hold the back. So this one I'm holding the back and turning the nut. And these may or may not come out to be able to fully remove them. You just take the nut off, and it'll have to slide apart, and the bolts will stay up in there. Okay, we have all the bolts out of the bell housing. Next I'm going to take off the 3/4 inch nuts off the front engine mounts. I'm going to remove the other smaller bolts too that hold it to the frame, and then, like I said earlier, when we lift it, whichever ones want to come off first is what's going to happen. Here I'm removing the bolts that hold the front engine mount to the frame. These are just 1/2 inch nut and bolt, 1/2 inch socket and wrench. Once you get some of the weight off the motor, the mount should come right out. This one's going to fall right out just like that. Okay, now that we have the front motor mounts out of the engine and we have the bolts out of the bell housing to the back of the engine, we're going to move we have some weight off, we're going to move the whole Jeep back a little bit, and hopefully that engine will pop right out of there. I'm going to put a chock over here. Okay, now the engine has come loose and it's off of the transmission shaft, or the output shaft. We're going to jack it up, winch it up, I guess you could say. Everything off, no wires, clutch is free. Okay, we rolled the Jeep back out of the way. Now we're going to put this trailer under the engine and drop it down in there. So we've got the engine off the lift and onto the trailer, and I run a chain underneath my trailer around the center post, and I'm just going to put a couple of bolts in through here on each side, one on each side, to where the motor mounts go, and then we'll put a strap over the top from the side rails. Well, here's our engine all wrapped up with plastic and strapped down to the trailer. We have about a 30-mile ride to the machine shop that's going to repair it. I also put some plastic over my bell housing to cover up my throwout bearing and the shaft that goes to the transmission. So that wraps up our video. I hope this helps you remove your Jeep engine, and thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.